and the car went into a skid and I could not get control of it. And I remember feeling like calm, and I remember I seen the car was heading for a tree, a big old tree, and there was nothing I could do. So I took my hands off the steering wheel and I just got my head down. And I remember just feeling it, like the calmest feeling.
With me today is Karen Docherty. Welcome and thanks for coming on the show, Karen. It's good to have you here.
Pleasure to be here.
All right. Well, I understand that you've had a connection to the spirit world since you were very, very young. So how about you tell us what your life was like growing up and when you started to notice that connection?
Yeah, I mean, you know what? You get asked this question as a medium quite a lot. And in the early days, I think I remember feeling a little bit like, how did this start? You know, I was questioning it myself because it was very natural. So when something's very natural to you, you have to kind of think about it for a little minute and analyze it, much like a singer. You know, if you asked a singer, how do you sing? They would say, oh, I just do. So it took me a little while, but really when I look back on my childhood, you know, I remember seeing people in the house that I knew weren't, you know, from this world, but I used to say that they were from the other place. So I kind of always inherently knew that there was another place. I didn't know really what it was or why I could see them. And I kind of feel like I thought everyone could see them. So it didn't feel too different for me. And the adults around me at that time, like my parents, I think they thought it was imagination most of the time, or, you know, imaginary friends. So it wasn't until probably a bit later in life, maybe into my early teens, that I really started to take notice of the communication. Like they would talk to me or I would hear things. And usually it happened in the night time, you know, when I was in bed and relaxed, sleeping, I would be woken up. I felt people around me. Other times it would be at my grandmother's a lot of the time where I would just see people and I would tell her. And she was very cool about it. She just used to say, oh, the dead don't harm you. And so she knew. And I found out later that she was mediumistic as well. But really, then going on from teenage years, it just kind of escalated a bit further on. And I used to be a bit overwhelmed with it actually, until I decided that eventually there's something in this. And I had been drawn to mediumship always. I had read books from an early age. I watched mediums when they started to come on TV. And I was always fascinated with it.
So was there anyone, you mentioned your grandmother there. So when you were young, was there anyone that you confided in as to what was going on or just because it seems so normal, you just thought, oh, it's not worth mentioning, or how did that go?
Yeah, it was more just like a question here and there. And, you know, I used to say to my grandmother, you know, there's a lady in the kitchen and she was speaking to me or she was waving at me. And it was more that kind of line of questioning because for me, it wasn't frightening. It was just something that happened. And it was always kind of the same response. Oh, don't worry about that. You know, my grandmother kind of made it very normal for me. And she used to say, you know, to my father, it was my father's mother. So she used to say to him, you know, oh, Karen brings spirit in with her when she comes in. So it's like she absolutely knew, but didn't want to make a big deal of it. Whereas other people, like even my mum, she would kind of say, oh, there's nobody there. Or, you know, what are you talking about? It was more like they didn't understand it, so they didn't talk about it. Whereas my grandmother kind of always gave me that avenue to say things to her, and I knew that she would be okay with it.
Yeah, I often hear this story. It kind of makes me wonder how many people who sort of had psychic abilities as a child, especially in mediumship, and because of a parent saying, well, there's actually nothing there, that they kind of doubted themselves and managed to kind of shut down that connection. So it's like you had your grandmother there to kind of normalize it for you.
Yeah.
So in as you got into your teenage years, um, actually that's what I was going to say. So other people I've spoken to in teenage years, especially, they kind of get to a stage where they just don't want to hear about spirit anymore because they're doing their own thing and they're becoming independent. How did it evolve for you, that relationship, as you got older?
Yeah, I definitely think there's part of it in that time in your life where you are busy with your own life. You're doing your own development. You're kind of developing into a young adult. And I think that the way that it works now that I know about spirit, the spirit world know that, they know that you have to live this human life. So I really feel that although I could still hear them or see them or feel them, it didn't become overwhelming for me at the teenage point. And I really do feel now that's because my spirit team would know that this is my time to develop here in human form. So they're not really going to interrupt too much. It became more overwhelming for me in my early 20s, I would say, where I would hear lots of voices all speaking at once, and I would go to bed at night time, and the only way I can describe it was like tuning in a radio where lots of voices would talk over the others, and I couldn't make sense of what any of them were saying. So at that point, I did go and speak to a local medium about it, and just kind of mentioned it to her and said, "This is happening to me. I don't know what it is." And she's the one that said, "Well, that's because you need to develop your mediumship." And at that point, I replied, I said, "I'm not a medium." I said, I can feel things and see things, but I'm not a medium." And it took me a while to actually believe that that could be true, because I was so fascinated with mediumship and absolutely loved it and watched mediums all the time. For me, that was a grand thing. I didn't think I could do that. So it took me a little while to kind of let her words sink in. And then I did go and see about it and sit in a development group, what we called the home circle here. So that was like a group of 6 people who were sitting for development. I sat there for maybe up to 3 months. It was meant to be, it was very strict, and the teacher was very strict. And, she was a spiritual teacher, and she said, "You must stay here for 2 years. You've got to develop. This is a long road, and you have to lay the foundations," which I truly believe in. So I was quite happy. But after 3 months, she said to me, "You're needing other learning. You need to go and work. Because by that time, it was quite a natural thing for me, and I was picking lots of things up, and evidential mediumship was already present. So she wanted me to go and learn elsewhere. So at that point, I went down to the Arthur Findlay College in London and just started going on courses. And then I applied for a scholarship there, the Gordon Higginson Memorial Scholarship, and I won that scholarship that year. So they gave me a further 3 years study. But I remember, like, I just wanted to drink in everything that I could find. Like, I was so, like, enthusiastic. I was just so passionate about learning every aspect of what was to come. Because for me, I kept saying to Spirit, if I'm doing this, if this is true and I can do this, then I want to have the knowledge and I want to be able to do it properly. I don't want to say I'm doing it and then not be doing it properly. So I just went down every avenue after that and read and researched and attended to classes at the college.
So, how old were you when you started at Arthur Findlay College? Were you having to juggle work and children and other things at that stage?
I was, yeah. I had 3 children, and, I had my own work as well. And at that point, it was maybe 25 hours a week I worked at that point, maybe to 30 hours. So I had to, take holidays and make sure I could go on a weekend and have childcare in place. And, it was a lot of juggling. My family were really wonderful about it, and I think they could see that this was something I had to do. And something I don't often talk about is on podcasts or in public, but at that point in my life, I was going through a really difficult marriage. And I remember being told from Spirit, "This is what you have to do." And it gave me a knowledge. This is because I'm not going to be staying in this situation. And it was almost like they were giving me this glimpse of my future of just work hard. This is the way it's going for you. And I always had that knowledge, and it kept me going at that point. And then evidently, that's what happened. But yeah, I had good support, but I needed to do it. It was like something in me that I just couldn't quieten that down. I had to go and do it.
And did you meet any really fascinating people at Arthur Findlay College? It's a place that I would really like to go and visit. Like, I don't have any natural abilities, but I'd certainly like to go and experience one of those classes, like, for a week, and see what I could learn. Did you meet anyone interesting there?
Well, firstly, the building itself is amazing. The energy is amazing. It's so healing. And that was the first thing that I felt when I got there. And of course, there's all of the mediums of the past, the pioneers of spiritualism, they've all went there. So for me, that was a connection straight away. But yeah, I mean, I met some lovely, I've met people that I'm still friendly with, other mediums, or just, other people that were on the courses. But I've met some wonderful teachers, and two of which I mention a lot, Simon James and Brian Robertson. They're from Canada, and they are the most wonderful teachers. They're so knowledgeable about mediumship, and I would still, to this day, no matter how long I've been working myself, I would still gladly go and sit in one of their lectures, one of their classes, because their knowledge is unbelievable. And I'm very lucky to know them, and they have guided me on my journey at times in the early days.
So at what point, like I love business as well, so I'm curious about how do you have to sort of make a leap from, yes, I can, I've got all this experience and I can do these things, I can communicate with spirit pretty well, and then you've got to translate that into something that helps people, but it's also business because you've got to live, right? So how did you navigate that?
Yeah, I had a fear about that as well. So I was working at the time and trying to make ends meet like everyone else with a young family. And I went into my work one day, and what had happened at that point was I had started to do some practice readings. I would start to go around people's houses when they asked me to, then to do readings and charging like a really minimal amount. So I was kind of just finding my feet with it and getting my confidence up with it. Even though I felt like I was doing a good service, I still wasn't confident enough to kind of say, right, this is what I'm going to do. And I also didn't ever make it about money. And to this day, I still don't like this kind of making it about money, even though, like you say, you have to live, you've got bills to pay, and all of the rest of it. So at that point in time, I was quite happy doing it that way. But I went to work one day and really unexpectedly was told I was to be made redundant. The business was closing. It was very sudden. And I remember going home that day and thinking, I can't, I need to get another job. I was starting to kind of get really anxious about how I was going to pay the bills. And so I started to look for other work. And within that week, and this is no exaggeration, within that week, my phone never stopped for people wanting readings. So before I knew it, my diary was full the following week. It was full the following week after that. And then from that moment on, that's the way it went. So again, I took it as a sign from spirit. This is what I'm supposed to be doing. Because for me, I didn't go out and look for that. It was something that just kind of escalated from there on through recommendation. So I took it from spirit that, okay, this is what I'm supposed to do. And really since then I've just worked full time with it.
Oh, that's great. So you've got some interesting stories. I've watched some of your other interviews, particularly the one that you had with Julie Ryan, and I wonder if you could share a couple of those with us. There's the car accident and the angel experience. Could you tell us about that?
So yeah, as a psychic medium, you always can pick up things for everyone else. And right away you tune into that and you know what you're doing, you know what it's for and all of the rest, and you pass that on. When it comes to your own self, sometimes you're just so oblivious to it, and it's the craziest thing. So I was visiting a friend one day, and she lives about an hour away from where I live. And all the way up to her home, these thoughts kept coming into my mind like, what would I do if I crashed? What would I do if I was trapped in a car? That was the biggest one. What would I do if I was trapped? What if I couldn't get out? What if there was an accident? All of these things. And every time the thought came in, I would catch myself and say, why are you thinking that? That's a negative thought. Don't think things like that. So I kept pushing the thoughts away. Got to her home, spent time with her, and then made the drive home. And it was only like 10 minutes, if that, away from my home, and the car went into a skid. There was loose gravel on the roads. The roads had just been resurfaced, and the car went into a skid. And I could not get control of it. And I remember feeling like calm. And I remembered I seen the car was heading for a tree, a big old tree,
Oh,
and there was nothing I could do. So I took my hands off the steering wheel and I just got my head down. And I remember just feeling it like the calmest feeling. Like I just remember thinking, I'm going to have to just deal with the consequences of this. That there's nothing I can do. But in that moment, I really truly feel that I was in some sort of bubble of protection. And I also felt like my car, someone was watching me from above and watching it unfold to make sure I was okay. That's the only way I can describe it. So for me, that was a huge feeling. And turns out that I was trapped in the car. The car flipped over a good few times and ended up on its side, and I couldn't get out. And then someone happened to come along and help me to get out the car. So it happened exactly the way it had been in my thought process. But I did feel very protective, and it was the most surreal feeling.
Do you have any sort of an idea as to why that occurred? It sounds like one of those events that you kind of plan ahead, but did you have an inkling of as to why that might have been something that needed to happen?
Well, I don't think it was something that needed to happen. I feel like accidents happen, but I think what I was picking
Mm.
up on because of my psychic ability was that my soul knew that that was happening. That was because remember, the soul or your spirit always knows ahead of what you know in the conscious mind. So I feel I was blessed enough to kind of have that warning, that feeling, even though I pushed it away and kept thinking it was my negative mind coming in. But I do feel that that's what happened. I do feel that then the spirit world stepped in and my spirit team were there. I also feel my mother was there, my grandmother was there. And not because, like accidents happen every day and then that's kind of indicating, well, some people get protected, some people don't. I don't mean it like that because accidents just do happen. But I just felt in that moment that they were there. And that's the only way I could describe it.
So did you get any injuries at all?
Not one injury. I got out that car, and
Wow.
and the thing is, the airbags had gone off, obviously, because I hit the tree full on. And what I didn't know was it causes like a spark for the airbags to go off. So there's a smell of like smoke
Mm.
or fire. So I started to go into a panic, thinking the car's going to go on fire, and I could not get out. I was trying to kick the windscreen. I was trying to push doors. I couldn't get out. But when I did get out, the gentleman who stopped managed to climb on the car and open the door wide and get me out. I didn't have no injuries at all, nothing. And the car was an
Wow.
absolute write off. The car was wrecked. So there was nothing, nothing.
Wow. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
quite amazing. Quite
Um,
amazing.
yeah. I kind of I think what you said about how accidents happen, it's like I like to think of it as like there's all these different timelines of things that can happen in your life, and there's a general probability associated with each one. And as you get closer to that time, the probability of something occurring becomes greater and greater and greater until that actual event occurs. And it almost feels like this spiritual side of us has an idea of what that probability is like, and if it's a particularly strong one, then that's when you start to get flashes of this is what's going to happen. Not that you can really do anything about it, but it's what's kind of coming. Yeah, I feel like that's applicable just for individuals, but also for us as human beings as well. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, there's lots of stories about people being in those situations and at that moment, either hearing a voice or feeling protected or knowing, just having a knowing that something's going to occur because of that. So I think that our intuition kicks in as well, which is our psychic senses anyway, and we all have that. So I think that can kick in and can give us those warnings or give us those messages. But I also feel like, the spirit world can't entirely prevent things from happening. So that's why when people ask me, well, why are there accidents then? Why is there terrible accidents where maybe children pass away or, there's the spirit world can't stop these things happening. These are things that happen in the physical world. If they can protect us, they will. If they can't stop the events from happening, they will be there anyway to help us over to the other side. They can only do what they do from where they are.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in free will. I feel like that's a fundamental rule of the entire universe is free will. So there's kind of a line that the spirit world will never crosses because of free will. It's like, well, you got to have free will. You can kind of nudge things in one way or another, like a whisper in your ear kind of thing that doesn't contravene that law. But it seems like that's That's pretty fundamental. It's like, I think when people ask, why did God or whoever allow this to occur? Well, it's not that they don't care. It's because we have our free will, and that would actually go against our free will was if there was some sort of intervention. Yeah.
Mhm.
So, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think even if you take it to the level of people, like people come for readings, for instance, and they maybe got something going on in their life and they want you to tell them, what's going to happen. They want the guarantees of, what's the outcome. And as much as I can tune in to their spirit, their soul's path, and feel the outcome of things, which I do often, and the potential of things, I'll always say to people, but this is still within your free will. Like, you have a potential that could be the outcome, but it's dependent on you. It's dependent on other people. So when, they realize that there's no guarantees, it depends on the choices you make in life and what you're doing. It's the same way that the spirit world can't prevent things or change things for us. And what would be the point? We are here to learn our lessons and evolve ourselves. If the spirit world could come in and stop every little thing from happening that would cause pain or cause suffering or cause bereavement, for instance, then we wouldn't get to evolve through that experience. And we do evolve through the more poorer experiences as well as the good ones.
So, can you describe for us your sort of mediumship abilities in a nutshell? And I know there's different kinds. So, um, if you've met other kinds of mediums that are, don't share the same abilities as yours, just so that people can get an overview of what mediumship's all about.
Yeah, of course. So mediumship for me anyway, and sure, most mediums, is about connecting to that higher self first. So connecting to my own higher self, which is my spirit, and that spirit connecting with the spirit world. The spirit world communicate with me through that ability that I have. So they'll communicate through seeing, hearing, feeling, many different ways. And so when I feel someone coming in from spirit, they will often allow me to feel their presence first. And then I can pick up on things that they felt in life, in their physical life, things that they've seen, things that they've done. They will talk to me, they will show me images. There's many different ways that they will use my ability to communicate what they want to communicate. And in general, that's the consensus for every single contact, every single communicator that comes forward. But I also can communicate with people that are still alive in this world that have dementia or Alzheimer's. And I discovered that really randomly. Like, that wasn't something that I thought would happen. And it was years ago. I was doing a reading for someone, and I'd said to her, your mum's here. And I gave details of the mother, and she said, well, that sounds like my mum, but my mum has not passed away. And I said, oh, right. And I felt our mum there, like, really present, just as I did the other spirit people that I was communicating with for her. So I kind of came away from it, and then the mum was there and she was speaking to me, and I said, no, I said, now I know I don't want to alarm you. So this doesn't mean that your mum's passing away. If you're telling me she's alive in this world, then you're right about that. I said, but does your mum have dementia, advanced dementia? And she said, yes. And I said, I'm communicating with your mum. And so I gave her everything that the mother wanted to say, and it was evidential. She explained where she was at that point, what was in her room, things that had happened. And it was to bring the daughter some healing. It was to let the daughter know, look, it might be that I can't communicate in this world, but please know I'm all right. I'm within my spirit. I'm all right. So this happened at one time, and I thought, wow, that's never happened before. Since then, it has happened so many times, and I will know instantly now. I've got your father here, but I know he's still here in this world, but I know he has dementia because I can feel it straight away. I know the difference now. And I've only had one other medium talk about that. That's not to say there's only one other medium that can do it, but the only medium I've heard talk about it is John Edward. Um, he mentioned it in a podcast that I was listening to just maybe 2 years ago, and I was like, finally, like, this is something that I've been doing for such a long time. So I know there will be other mediums that can do it, but that was really fascinating. And it really is because that spirit person, so let's say that mother, she is within her physical body and she is alive, but the illness that she has prevents her from communicating that. So the brain's kind of shut down, or the communication part shut down. So she is within her spirit self, she is within her soul. And because I can connect with souls and spirit, that meant she could connect with me. And that's how I figured out that's how it works.
Yeah, that's really good, isn't it? You're actually the second person. I can't remember exactly which interview it was. It might be one I haven't published yet. It was probably 1 or 2 ago, where the same sort of thing, but it was with her own mother who had dementia, and it completely transformed her relationship because she was able to actually communicate and understand what was going on, and because her mum and her dad were still alive, and her mother, who had dementia, was kind of almost told off the daughter to say, just stop trying to make things easier for your dad because you're not helping. But, that was the spirit
Yeah.
communication that she had for her, and it changed things a lot for her. Yeah, so I can imagine. I mean, dementias are fairly. I don't know if it's more common these days. I certainly seem to hear about it more. Maybe it's just because I'm getting older, but I can see how that would be a really, really, useful intervention to help
Mhm.
healing, within families that are experiencing that.
Sure.
Um,
Everything in spirit does is about healing. So, as long as
mm.
like that should be the motivation of any medium, really, to bring healing to both worlds, really.
Now you've got another great story about Helen Duncan. So can you tell us what you know about her, and I know, and what type of medium that she was?
Yeah, so Helen Duncan was a materialization medium, a physical medium. And physical mediumship, now you really don't hear about it now. It was something that there seemed to be more of it, in the early 1900s and going forward. And Helen Duncan, when I first started, well, before I first knew I was a medium, I would read books all the time on mediumship and all the rest of it. And Helen Duncan was someone that stood out to me. So as the years progressed and I started to kind of develop my mediumship, I still had this. I felt like a connection to Helen. That's the only way I can describe it. Now, she was Scottish, she was a Scottish medium, and she did live only like 30 minutes away from where I lived. So I felt like maybe that's the connection, that she's local to me kind of thing. But I was fascinated with her story. So what happened with Helen was she didn't know she was a medium, and one day she fell asleep. And apparently she started to, like, she was saying things and kind of she was awake in the room, but to her she felt like she was asleep. So she'd kind of gone into this trance like state. And her husband was there and he told her this is what was happening and all the rest of it. So she started to develop that, and she went into physical mediumship, not through looking for it, just that it happened. And what physical mediumship is, or materialization, is where the ectoplasm mixes with the substance within the medium and it comes into the physicality of things. So this person in the spirit world can appear in physical form through the medium. So she was doing this, she was doing seances here and there, and she was becoming popular and known about as well. But in those days, really, it was very secretive. Like, you really weren't allowed to be a medium at that point. You were frowned upon
Mm.
for it. So it was kind of all behind closed doors. So she done a seance, I think, in England, and a young sailor, materialized and spoke to his mother and told his mother that the ship had gone down 2 years earlier, gave the name of the ship, everything, all the detail, and that he had passed away 2 years earlier. So after the seance, the mother went to the government and said, "You've not told me my son's died," and she really pushed for information. Where did you get this information? Winston Churchill was prime minister at the time, and they went to Helen and arrested her, and she went to jail because they called her a spy. They said she must have got the information somewhere, and they put her to jail. And she spent, I think, 9 months in jail because of this, and they actually charged her. I think it was with fraudulent mediumship and things, or witchcraft. Anyway, when she came out of there, she vowed, "I will never go through that again. I don't know why that had to happen to me." So she said she wouldn't do any more seances. Well, they begged her to do another seance, and she done one, and it was actually a setup. And whilst she was in trance, while she was in that place, they raided it. The police came in, and the ectoplasm went straight back into Helen's body, and she actually was rushed to hospital, and she died of internal burns. because it's very dangerous, to startle or to do that. So she died because of it. So fast forward to me doing my mediumship, and I was asked to attend a Helen Duncan convention and do a demonstration of mediumship. So I went down, it was again down in England. I went down to do this. I was really quite honoured to be part of it. I don't know how they got my name. They got it through another medium, I think. And I went down and I done my demonstration. And as I was doing my demonstration, I went to this 4 ladies sitting at a table, and I said, I have your grandmother here. And she was giving me lots of information and about her and her life, and not saying she was a medium or anything, but coming to the end of the communication, I said, this? I said, she was a medium. I said, but I can feel that she did mediumship. And they were all saying, yes, yes. And they never gave anything away. Anyway, afterwards, they came up and said, do you know who you had? And I said, well, I had your grandmother. And they said, our grandmother was Helen Duncan. We are the grandchildren of Helen Duncan. And this is us in the convention. So that was amazing. And I'm still friends with one of them to this day. So I felt like I did have a connection with Helen, and so she would have known that as well. So that was quite an amazing part of my journey.
So I have a question. I know a lot of people are fascinated by mediumship to the point of fandom. I know that I'm one of those people, and but never really had any kind of abilities transpire. Not that I've spent a lot of time trying to develop them. So for somebody who does feel really drawn to to this kind of work, and they wanted to learn about more, or perhaps try to develop their abilities, where do you think they should start?
I think the biggest thing is to realize that you have to build that foundation. I think now, and it's something that I see a lot, there's a lot of online courses, of course. There's lots of, 1-day workshops, 2-day workshops. And whilst they're really helpful if you already know about it, and it's to kind of enhance what you already know, there's also the side of it that I feel now everyone wants to do it overnight. Everyone wants to plug into this and say, that's what I want to do. And also, I think a lot of people come to learn about it that just are like, they're just interested in it. So they want to develop
Mm.
it. And I always say, look, you can always develop psychic senses. Every one of us are psychic. So therefore, you can develop your psychic senses. Mediumship's different. Mediumship, I feel that you're born a medium. I feel like it's a natural part of you that you can then develop. But the biggest thing I would say is go slow. And that doesn't mean time wise, because for me, it happened quite quickly. If you're natural, it will happen the way it's supposed to happen. But what I mean is get the knowledge, understand that you are spirit first, understand where you can connect with your higher self before you start trying to plug into the spirit world or get communication. Because I think that can cause frustration when it maybe doesn't happen the way that you think it will. So my courses that I do mentorship mainly because I feel like a one-to-one mentorship is better for the person. And because mediumship's very unique to each individual. So although there's like things that everyone can plug into, and that we can talk about those in workshops and seminars and things, when you're mentoring someone, you're tailoring it to what they need for their mediumship, and you can recognize that. So when someone comes to me, I always start at the foundation level of this is what you need to do. You need to learn who you are and where you're at on your journey, and then we build the skills from there.
So I recently learned that the estimate for the number of galaxies in the universe has been changed. So I think it used to be it was like 200 to 300 stars in the Milky Way galaxy, and then 200 to 300 billion stars, and then there was like another 100 or so billion of those galaxies in the universe. And I think that's been revised to something like 1 trillion galaxies, like an incredible amount of places around. So it kind of it's a bit hard to say, well, we can't be the only ones. So it makes me think about like the vastness of the physical universe, and then the vastness of the spiritual world must be even more huge. So do you have you ever had like spirits that clearly aren't human or from another place come through? And does that happen very often to you?
Never, never. And I think it's because, again, I hear a lot of this, right? I hear a lot of people saying that they're communicating with, other beings from other places. For me, in my mediumship, I feel is here to help people and communicate from their loved ones what is needed to bring that healing. And so I think, and I don't mean in a limited way. I'm not saying that people can't communicate with other beings. It's just never happened to me. And it's maybe because I don't look for it. It's maybe because for me, it makes sense that if I'm dealing with people in this world, then I'm going to help with the people in this world. And that's where I'm at. So for me, what would that bring? If I was communicating with another being from a different place, what would that bring? Because there's no evidence. So mediumship is evidential. And so you've got to evidence your mediumship, which means prove, which means give the person something that only they would know and something that the spirit person has seen since they crossed over. That's what evidential mediumship is. Whereas if I was communicating with a being from somewhere that we don't know about, then that could be in my mind, and I can't evidence that. So for me, evidential mediumship is more important, and bringing that into this world. And again, that's not to say there aren't mediums out there that can do the other stuff that we're talking about, but for me, evidence is important.
And do like parallel or past lives of people, does that ever come through? It sounds like that might be in the same sort of category as people from other worlds.
It can come through. I mean, if we talk about reincarnation is a huge thing, right? But if we talk about reincarnation, then obviously there's going to be past lives connected to talking about reincarnation. But reincarnation in itself is a vast subject as well. And it's not like if I pass away and I go back to the spirit world, then my incarnation here as Karen Docherty ends. I don't come back. The Karen Docherty that experienced this life doesn't come back and experience another life. Part of my spirit might, but it's still not Karen Docherty. It's a different part of my spirit. It's a different element to my spirit that maybe needs to be developed or evolved in an incarnation. So therefore, I could definitely pick up on maybe something that happened in a past life, or maybe feel there's a connection to a past life, but it's not for that person. If somebody said to me, in a past life, you were a queen, then I would say, well, but I've not lived before, because Karen Docherty is here now. The other part to my spirit might have been a queen, but Karen Docherty wasn't a queen. So for me, it gets very complicated. And I think another thing that it does is it people get into a place of, well, maybe because that happened in a past life, that's made me fearful in this life. Or maybe because I was, in a war zone or in battles in a previous life, maybe that's why I've not been good at X, Y, and Z. And what I think that does is it takes away from the life experience that person is supposed to be living, because we are meant to live in the here and now, and we are meant to experience everything in the present. And I think if you complicate it too much, then it takes away people's this life that they're meant to be living.
Mm. And do you feel that there's any relationship between sort of trapped emotions or emotions, things that we hold on to, and our physical health?
Oh, absolutely. That's something that I truly believe in. It manifests as illness or disease, but stress is the biggest thing. Anxiety, fears, all of that really does cause traumatic blockages. And I really feel like that affects the physical self too. And it's not that every illness is caused by that. Someone could be perfectly calm and happy and still have an illness to deal with. But I do feel like it really does affect the human self. It really does. And I think that that's another thing. Like, now I'm happy to hear that schools are starting to teach meditation and breath work and mindfulness, because really we do have to get to know ourselves. And when I was younger, none of that was spoken about. Like, no meditation, certainly here in Scotland, you weren't allowed to do anything like that. That was just seen as like crazy stuff. But now I think that that's a massive part of things, breath work, understanding that you are spirit, that things affect you, that it's okay to be affected and how to cope with it. So therefore, then hopefully the physical self would be healthier.
Now, I think you've mentioned there's a particular kind of meditation that you do for you personally. And I know that meditation is a fairly individual thing, like people got to find what works for them. Can you tell us about what your practice is like?
Yeah, I think, I was never good at meditation. I always say that. I was one of the ones that would be like, I love meditating, but I can't meditate for an hour. I'll just fall asleep. So it didn't
Mm.
really work for me to sit for a long time. So my meditation really consists of when I have that quiet moment or when I create that quiet moment, I might only meditate for maybe 10, 15 minutes at a time. But I know my connection to my spirit team because of that meditation. So when you're trying to connect with your spirit guides and helpers, then it's a must that you must know where to go to the quiet place to receive that communication or receive that connection. And so my meditation was, like I say, walking in nature or taking 10 or 15 minutes out and just really talking to the spirit world and kind of creating that place in my own mind where I know if I go to that place, I will connect with spirit, and just practicing that really. And that's how I've gotten to know a lot of my guides through that process and waited for them to present to me. I think this is another thing you hear a lot of, you must know your guides, you look for your guides or ask your guides to tell you things. I didn't really follow that. I used to feel like, well, it'll happen when it's supposed to happen. If I look for it with my mind, then my mind will probably give me answers because the mind is a very powerful tool. So if you ask something of the mind, then your mind will respond. So then how do you know it's truly the spirit world or just your own mind? So I didn't look for it. I just waited for that to come to me.
Now, I've heard you mention you make a distinction between guides and guardians. So can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I think that I spoke about that before or many times because people have asked me before, like, oh, my mother's passed away. Is she one of my guides? And that isn't the case. So if you have a loved one that's passed away or someone that you were close to in life or someone that knew you in life, they can become your guardians. That's what I call them. Like, so I know that my mum's a guardian for me. My grandmother's a guardian for me. My guides are people that there are spirits, sorry, that are more highly evolved than that. They've been in the spirit world, whether they ever walk the earth or not. They are guides that have knowledge. They are guides that will help me at certain parts of my development, much like going to school. You'll have a teacher in year one and then you'll have a teacher in year five, and they'll teach different things or they'll help you to develop different things. And for me, that's what my spirit team do. So I know if I'm doing trance work, I know which guides come in. I know if I'm on the platform demonstrating mediumship, I know which guides are there helping me with that. And that's only because I've developed that relationship with them over time. But they will come in and out as and when it's needed. And new guides will come in, and other guides that I haven't met yet or that are there in the background that I don't know about will be there also. But your guardians are usually your loved ones, your soul family, people that you're connected with.
So, how does the mediumship process work for you, Karen? So, do you have to put yourself into a trance, or does it just you're able to be in both worlds at once? I know it's different for different people.
Yeah, with mine now, and again, this is through many years of practice and letting it develop itself. So now, if I go to do, let's say, an audience event where there might be, 100 people there or 200 people there, I don't get get myself into that place of, oh, I've got to prepare, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. I always say a prayer. I always say a prayer either on the way to the event or, ask spirit to come in and thank them for being there. But apart from that, I don't really do anything else apart from have the knowledge that as soon as I walk up onto that stage, that they will be there and I just to go and do the work that I'm supposed to do. So there's not really a process for that. Whereas at one time, when I first started out, I remember thinking, oh, I've got to sit for half an hour and I've got to speak to people and I've got to ask them to come in and I've got to be quiet within myself. And you kind of went through this ritual of practicing that to think that you had to get your connection that way. Whereas now it's just really more of switching my awareness. So I could be speaking to someone in the room. And then as soon as I turn my thoughts to the spirit world, I will feel them there. And that's really how it works for me. So it's more like an awareness. And entrancement as well, I would say, like you do go into an altered state when you're working with mediumship. You're kind of not present within the room at that point, even though you are physically, but your whole self, your whole being is blending with the spirit world. So it is an altered state that you go into.
And how do you feel after you've been doing that? Is it energizing, or are you drained? Are you tired? Do you need to rest? How does that work?
If it's private sessions, if it's like doing one-to-one readings at the end of the day or the end of the sessions, yeah, it's very exhausting. And I'm very exhausted after that. But if it's an event, if it's an audience event where you're demonstrating, then it takes me a good 2 or 3 hours to kind of come back down afterwards. That's more of an energizing experience. Although the next day usually is when I'm really exhausted from that. So it kind of, I don't know if it's because you're kind of up there, you're working with spirit, it's faster paced. Whereas if it's a one-to-one, you're working with the spirit world, but you're also working with the person in front of you, and you're tuning into them, maybe things they've got going on in their life, problems, maybe issues, different things, and they may have low energy themselves. So you're kind of taking all of that, whereas demonstrating is purely spirit. It's just purely the spirit world coming forward one after another. So it's a different kind of energy.
I know it's late there for you, so I don't want to put you on a spot. But sometimes when I talk to mediums, they're like getting a tap on the shoulder, like they need to tell me something. So is there anything that you need to tell me, or that the spirit world needs to tell me, either about me or about this channel, about what I'm doing here as well?
Not that I was feeling, only because we were chatting about everything else. So you're just not aware of it, unless you take that moment to tune in. But, I think that can happen. I think that definitely you'll sometimes, be speaking to someone, and then all of a sudden you're just feeling something needs said. But usually it's when the person asks for that reading, or when you've appointed that meeting, sort of thing, so that the spirit world know. It's not that they're not there for you, it's just that I'm concentrating on other things, I think, just now.
Okay, well, maybe I'll just ask you one question, because it's one of these things I've been vacillating about. So, because you mentioned Arthur Findlay College, and it's one of those. I'm in Australia, so it's a long way to get to the UK. But I'd really love to go and just go on one of their courses for a week. I don't know which one. And another option is the Monroe Institute in America, which is, I forget exactly where it is, Virginia, I think. And it's a different kind of training, because I'm not sure if you're familiar with what the Monroe Institute does.
No.
Robert Monroe was like the father of the out of body experience. That he kind of had out of body experiences, and they eventually developed the Monroe Institute, and they teach people about remote viewing and all kinds of stuff, different things that they're related, but they don't teach mediumship like they do at Arthur Findlay College. So, and I don't know, either one would be really fun, I think, for me. And I don't know how to figure out, okay, well, let's go down that path. I don't know which one's right. I still don't know whether even you might be able to help me answer that question.
Yeah, my feeling on that very strongly for you is the Monroe Institute. And I'll tell you, I feel that,
Okay. Yeah.
and I feel that it's because your connection to this, and connection to your kind of your level of interest in it as well. If you went to the Arthur Findlay College, I feel like you would be in the classes, you would be listening to it all. But I don't know that you've ever felt like, yeah, I want to do that to become a medium. Whereas I feel like you want to do this because you are so connected and fascinated by the whole spiritual aspect to it, and being a spirit person. And I think the Monroe Institute for you would give you all of that, without saying, right, sit in a classroom and link into your partner and get information for them, or ask who is there from the spirit world. I don't know that that's what you're looking for. I feel like you're definitely more for feeling spirit, feeling your higher self, feeling the outer body, doing the remote view. And I think all of that would be amazing for you.
You're right. Yeah, that is the right answer. And as soon as you said it, I thought, yes, that's exactly right. So it was good to be able to confirm that. Let me just see if I've got another question I want to ask you, Karen, before. There was one other. There was one other story. You had an experience at Arthur Findlay College about it was some sort of healing that occurred. It was a difficult time in your life. Do you recall what I'm talking about there? Could you tell us about that?
Yeah. At that point in my life, it was through my scholarship that I was doing. I think it was in my third year of the scholarship, and things were really particularly bad at home. Like I said, I'd been through, a really quite an abusive relationship. I was still in it at that point, or I was kind of in and out of it. And I had to go and attend that week because that was part of my scholarship conditions. I had to go. And the day that I went to travel down, I was so upset with everything. It was just so much for me to cope with. And I also, at that time, my mum was fighting cancer. So there was just a lot going on. And when I arrived there, you know, I had to get into classes and all of the rest of it. And I just couldn't speak to anyone. I was just so upset with everything. So I went for a walk in the grounds and around the building and the old part of the building. By the time I had walked, I think I was walking for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours, I felt completely healed. Like it was the most healing experience to this day that I have ever had. And I went into class after that and I was like a different person, but not because I was able, you know, to talk to people or put a smile on my face, just the real inner feeling of that was something else. That wasn't just me having a walk in nature, which I do often anyway, and de-stressing. It was something else. The healing power of that place for me, it was quite amazing. And I will never forget that. It was really, really profound.
Wow. So tell us about how people can get in touch with you if they want to, Karen, and tell us, I don't know if you've written any books. I know you do some courses. Tell us about what you've got going on.
Yeah, well, the writing of the books is something in progress, and it's been in progress for a while. I was told about 5 years ago by another excellent medium, actually, that you know you're going to be writing your books, and I was like, yeah, I've just got to get organised about all of that. But um, my mentorships is what I've been concentrating on. So I do online mentoring, one-to-one. I do in-person mentoring as well, but a lot of it's online because it's obviously clients from all over the world. So I'm based in Scotland. So the online mentorships I have created in in kind of collaboration with my son, who is also very spiritual, and he doesn't do readings like I do, but he works more on the teaching side of things. He's very psychic and mediumistic himself, but he worked in mental health for a long time, and he kind of felt like although he can help people in a mental health aspect, he was feeling like they weren't really understanding their own spiritual power, what they've got to get them through this life. And so he then kind of started to developing that himself. So we collaborated. We've got a mentorship program together where he teaches the foundational part of the courses, and I come in on the classes and come in on the workshops, and then I take over the rest of it. So we do a mentoring together, which is really wonderful, and it actually works really well. And so we'll have like quite a few people from around the world doing that. So anybody that's interested in that can apply for that. And I say apply because I personally, this is my son doesn't do this part of it. I do it where I will speak to the person or tune into them and see if I feel that it would be a fit for them. And then once they've gone through that process on the website of submitting that, then we take it from there. But it's a really special thing. And the reason that I done it was because when I was learning, even though I was at the Arthur Findlay College, I didn't have someone I could call upon. I didn't have someone to ask the questions. I didn't have the mentoring. So I decided back then, when I am able to do this, I'm going to be doing this. So I do it. So it's all at the website, which is KarenDocherty.com.
Okay, great. We'll put some that information in the show notes for you. I've spoken to a number of people that are in either wanting to write a book or in the process of writing a book. And I don't know if this helps, but the one thing I've learned is that is setting aside like a block of time on a pretty regular
Yes.
basis seems to be important for some people. And then for other people, like I've got my friend Nikki Allen, who I'm sure you know Nikki Allen from the UK, the
Yep.
psychic medium. She she's just finishing a book, but she basically had been, it's called Earthwalkers, I think. She's written a couple of other books, but this is a fiction. And she just had to like basically put herself into a not talk to anyone for months and then just finish it. It was kind of, she just had to do it all in one go.
Yeah.
And I've heard other authors do that too. Like I don't know if it was Stephen King would sometimes do that, just see nobody and just write for 8 hours a day. I
Yeah.
don't know if that's helpful. Now,
I think
before we wrap up, is
I
it?
think that's the way I would
Sorry.
have to go as well. I think that's the way I would have to go
Yeah.
as well. Put that time aside.
Just become a hermit and write. That's it. All right. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything that you'd like to leave people with? Any messages you've got for people that are watching this video?
Yeah, just, remember who you are. Like, and I say that in a way, like, I think that because we are human and we have to deal with human life, of course, and things that happen in life, sometimes I think we do forget that we are spirit people in human form. And because we are spirit, that power is there for every individual. Like, there's nobody any different. We all have that spirit power within us. And I think if you are going through hard times, if there are listeners or viewers that are going through hard times, plug into yourself. It's not always about plugging into the spirit world or who's there, who you might have there, your mum, your dad, your cousin. It's about plugging into yourself and understanding the power that you have.
Karen, it's been my pleasure to talk to you today. I love what you're doing. Keep doing that, and thanks for being my guest on the show.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure.